Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Making Decarbonization Fair. This event, as you have probably known, is promoted by Cost Engager and funded by Cost Engager, and it is also organized by the Fuel Poverty Research Network, by Cesare in Portugal, and also by DECO. And both of those, Cesare represents the research community at the University in Lisbon, and DECA is an association that represents citizens and consumers and helps people with a large number of actions for daily life, including energy actions. This morning, we're going to take a long look at energy poverty across the EU, and I'm particularly interested to have this panel discussion because we're going to very much look at the range of actors that need to be involved in the fact that we need to have coordinated action across policy, technology, citizens advocacy, and consumer protection. And so we have a really great range of speakers. We have Teresa Asterici, and I probably just said that all wrong. Asterici, sorry, from the European Commission Directorate General and Directorate for the Internal Energy Market. We have Jeppe Jensen from the Climate Alliance, who is also going to be involved with the EU Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. Then we'll have Cesare Vichy, who represents the European Consumer Organization, but also one of the Horizon 2020 projects, which is Solutions to Tackle Energy Poverty. And then finally, we'll have Martha Meyer from the Right to Energy Coalition, which very much is an advocacy group working at the EU policy level. And so I'll introduce each of those people a little bit more at the time that they're going to speak. And to give you an idea of the format of today, first of all, we're going to give Teresa quite a long time to present the EU recent policies at the EU level. Then her and I will have a little Q&A, and so you're welcome to into the chat part of Whova to put questions that you would like to direct to Teresa specifically. Then what we'll do is let Jeppe, Cesare, and Martha each give their presentations, and then we'll follow up with a discussion, a Q&A between everybody. So if everybody's ready to go, one detail is the session is being recorded, so we just need to make you aware of that. And the other thing I wanted to do is just quickly share my screen to give you an idea of where people are checking in from. I think we have about 360 people registered for the conference itself. And as you can see, it's, I think, up to 41 countries that are signing in at different points during this week. So that's pretty exciting. I think when the event was going to be in Lisbon, we thought maybe we would get 80 to 100 people, and now we've quadrupled that. So here we go. So as I mentioned, Teresa is with the she's a legal and policy officer in the Directorate General and Directorate for the Internal Energy Market within the European Commission. As such, she helps formulate policies in areas related to support and promotion of local energy actions across the EU, and also in relation to the a fair and sustainable transition to a fair and sustainable energy systems. So Teresa, I'm going to hand the floor right over to you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. So let me, before anything, share my screen with you. Okay. So there we go. I'm trying to see if, I hope my audio is fine. Everyone can hear me, perfect. So thank you very much for this great opportunity to give you a bit of an overview of what the Commission is doing to advance the causes of energy poverty solutions in the EU. It is extremely timely. I mean, there have been several presentations on this topic given by myself and my colleagues since the adoption of one of the more relevant packages of the Commission last October, but I think this spring kind of gives us a time to really look back at what has been discussed until now and and also very interestingly, in the context of this conference, to really look at how we intend to put energy poverty at the center of net zero policies, in view of the upcoming Fit for 55 package. I hope I managed to use Wova, this platform, well, because it's kind of hard to find all these to have the app running at the same time. But if any questions are raised throughout, please do let me know, maybe Marilyn, so I can tackle them. So I am basically going to focus on giving you a presentation, seeing how kind of the Green Deal sets the main framework for what we do, for what I do in DGNA Unit B1, which is in charge of local initiatives, just transition, and consumers more broadly, so consumer protection and information rules in the internal energy market. And then I will kind of go into the main policy framework where the energy poverty work has kind of seen more prominence with the Renovation Wave. I will then look into the recommendation on energy poverty that we have issued with it. And I think point 4 will be good because it will allow us to kind of discuss how the upcoming revisions what they will mean essentially for energy poverty. And as a last point to bridge then with what Jeppe, also online today with us, will say, I will kind of give you an overview of what we have as local initiatives in DGNA. So let's see, next slide. It should be fine. There we go. So this first slide really serves to recall the overarching framework of the Green Deal, which, as you all know, fundamentally informs and boosts the ENER initiatives that have seen the light of day months ago. So recapitulating, the Energy Union objectives are clearly intertwined with the broader objectives of the Green Deal proposed about this time last year. And this is the case for the just transition principle, and obviously it's also known as the principle of leaving no one behind. I do always say that they come very much hand in hand. They're really one side of the same coin. And I'd like to say that obviously already back in 2016, energy poverty was slowly making its way up the political agenda when the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, which started as a pilot commission project funded by the Parliament, commenced its work in 2016. The energy poverty challenge was associated with a relatively limited amount of policy and action at EU and member state level. But we are glad to say that today, energy poverty is explicitly integrated in a number of EU directives and member state policies, and clearly becoming an increasingly relevant part of local government programs. There is undeniably an active polity of practitioners, advocates, and researchers committed to addressing the issue, and many of you are surely in touch with them regularly. So this is why the Commission felt it was necessary in the Green Deal communication to reiterate that the Commissioner was under an obligation legally to provide guidance on energy poverty to member states last year. So if I go to the next slide, I wanted to, maybe I can, I don't know why the next slide is not on this one. I had changed very recently, but it's fine. So what I had in this common slide, I wanted to reiterate that there is a clear link between energy poverty and the energy targets. The Commission always makes 2 points to communicate the clear links between energy poverty and the targets. Really, the fact that they address structural causes of energy poverty. So the fact that we address them can make a clear, sizable impact, a contribution, to reducing these targets, in our opinion. So really through energy inefficiency of homes, including in particular social housing and tenancy situations, that is really where we have to work most on to demonstrate that there's a sizable contribution in this respect. And we do believe that in the long run, there should be a reduction in the need for public interventions in the price of energy supplies, which can, of course, distort competition. And then social policy will always have a role to play, or will have to play its full role, where energy poverty is primarily driven by general poverty. So let me, as I said, I will be focusing now on the renovation wave, which kind of to reiterate the main objective, it really is about reducing the renovation rate in the next 10 years and to contribute to making the continent carbon neutral in 2050. So here I kind of give you an overview of the three focus areas. So I think perhaps I can just recall the extent to which a refurbished and improved building stock in the EU will help pave the way for this decarbonization. Renovation of both public and private buildings is an essential measure in this context, and it will be really driving the energy efficiency first principle in this sector. It is one of the main accelerators to actually make just transition a reality. The renovation pushes forward. The renovations pushed forward thanks to this initiative are really committed to enhancing the quality of life and health of people living in and using the buildings. And the intention is really to create up to 160,000 additional green jobs in the construction sector. And the intrinsic links with energy poverty is clear from the fact that it is one of the three focus areas, as you can see. And apologies about that. I want to stay on this slide for a bit. And I think I just want to stay on this slide to recall that the Commission has really chosen to mark the figure of 34 million Europeans unable to afford keeping their homes adequately heated in 2018 as a reference number, to underline that energy poverty remains a major challenge. Another key figure we provide in the communication of the renovation wave is that we had that about every year around 800,000 social homes need renovation, and that this translates into a 57 billion investment cap in social and affordable housing annually. So precisely because of this, the Commission adopted the recommendation on energy poverty, which really intends to, it has as a primary aim, let's say, to make it easier for member states to define and monitor energy poverty and to help spread best practices. So essentially, in this recommendation, the Commission takes the opportunity to acknowledge the prevalence of the phenomenon and that it is impossible to agree on a numerical threshold, since any proportion of households in energy poverty may be considered significant. So I think it's worth recalling again, so where this comes from, and what the order of assessment, how it goes. Member states are required to quantify the phenomenon. They're required to assess the number of households in energy poverty and provides, and the directive where this obligation is laid out, provides that member states must establish and publish the criteria underpinning this assessment. The recommendation recalls that possible criteria can be low income, high expenditure of disposable income on energy specifically, and again, as mentioned previously, poor energy efficiency of dwellings. So when the number of households in energy poverty is significant, member states with identified high levels must communicate an indicative objective to reduce energy poverty at home, provide a time frame, and outline relevant policies. And then they are under an obligation to report on any progress made towards the objective or reducing the number of households in energy poverty. The recommendation really does insist on that questions about affordability and what constitutes essential energy services must be seen in the national context. This is clear from the wording of the governance regulation, and also the link made with social policies is very explicit. So this will link to maybe one of our discussion topics. Both the issues of what basic standards of living must be, and And the question of the social support to be made available for this purpose depend on economic, social, and climate conditions really in the country. And we important to respect the principle of subsidiarity, where we're completely aware that energy poverty is the competence, obviously, of member states, and this is why it's a recommendation, and we want to give a lot of room for tailor-made responses where needed, attending to these national and regional specificities. And then I wanted to also say that we have a list of aggregate indicators suggested for use that have been developed at European level, so partly through the collaboration of Eurostat and the Energy Poverty Observatory. And we hope that they will help identify national specificities and, again, to promote best practices. So I don't want to go into too much detail with relation to the guidance that accompanies the recommendation, because it's quite a long document, and I invite you all to have a look at what it contains. But basically, the guidance is more about presenting the situation across member states. So we really make an assessment on the basis of 2018 data to see how, what we can say about the levels in each member state. So, for example, while the indicator ability to keep one's home adequately warm evolved favorably on average in the time frame 2010-2018, there were significant differences in the pace of change across the EU. So, for instance, in Bulgaria, Latvia, Poland, Portugal, and Romania, energy poverty has fallen significantly. But on the other hand, for this indicator, again, there are various that we analyze. Greece is on the other end, so where there is a record high. So these are the kind of things that we have kind of set a baseline, and we hope that experts and the Commission in the years to come will update these kind of assessments, and also on the basis of NECP information. And with regards to identified best practices, it is clear that member states have adopted different approaches. Most we have seen have not defined energy poverty. Public interventions, such as helping households that receive subsistence allowances to pay their energy bills, are based on criteria unrelated to energy. However, we have also observed that several countries have used the indicators we refer to in our recommendation to define the problem. And there are also, of course, those countries that treat energy poverty not as an energy policy issue, but rather as a part of general poverty. So we can think of, for example, Finland for this case. So if I now go to the next slide, if you don't mind, I would like to. I hope this is. I'm just kind of skipping slides because in the interest of time, because I feel that otherwise I'll spend too much describing too many specific areas of the legal act and the guidance. So focusing, I think the slide is very helpful because it really does answer many. We often get these questions asked, like, what do you now you've issued the recommendation, the Renovation Wave has come out, but what is next? It's very well to put things on paper, but we really want to see different. We want to see progress on the floor, on the ground, and what the Commission is doing to monitor this kind of progress, and who are you going to be involving to make this possible. And so what I always say is that we basically have the governance monitoring mechanisms. So linked to what we have in the NECPs and the national energy and climate plans and the long-term renovation strategies. This monitoring sort of framework has, from the DGN side, obviously, we will have an ENA technical working group, which will specifically be tracing the progress. There is an obligation under the governance regulation to produce progress reports. And so we are meant to assess these to understand if, to what extent things have been taken up, because as you know, the NECP assessments had a kind of especially the last table says where things can be reinforced and where things can be revised. So here we will be checking against the energy poverty recommendations. There is also obviously in all of this the ENED local initiatives and the new Energy Poverty Observatory in particular will be tasked with operationalizing and really tracking the uptake of the Commission's recommendations at local level. And more on this in the next presentation, which Jeppe Jensen will be giving us. There is also the Renovation Wave implementation plan. So indeed, the Renovation Wave provides in itself a monitoring mechanism. There is going to be a special follow-up for those of you, most of you might know about this already, but there's going to be a special follow-up of DG Grow's affordable housing initiative marked in the implementation plan. So we are hoping to really link our initiatives and our work to what they are doing on their side to make sure we make economies of scale and make the efforts and the priorities known through different communicators, so to speak. Then there is, of course, the European semester, and I had the pleasure of presenting the recommendation at the Social Protection Committee, and the uptake hopefully will be good. They had a big interest in what we are doing and in dedicating several sessions to energy poverty. So we will be closely we'll be updating them quite regularly on this. Which is very good. Then there is obviously the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights action plan. So we are in constant discussions with DG Employment. It will be a very good moment to follow up on what has been happening with energy poverty. And there is also, lastly, I'm sorry about this. There is also the committees. So the committees have already, we have the example of the Covenant of Mayors where they have been very supportive. So we are hoping to pick up on that as well and get their support for, so notably Committee of the Regions and the Economic and Social Committee, to get them to support the launch of the Energy Poverty Observatory and to follow up on the recommendations. So there's a sort of specific Committee of the Regions plan. And the latest update is showing a clear focus on energy poverty, which is very good. How am I doing with time, Marilyn? I hope it's okay.
It's okay if we can shift over to questions soon. It would be great. But if you have a couple more slides, we can let you do those.
Okay, I think this sort of last slide would be very good. I think it's helpful for those who are present today. I see there are 64 participants, which is great. I think this is a very relevant slide. I wanted to just make a few points here, if I can.
Please do.
So again, one of the big questions that we receive is what will happen with the revisions. Will energy poverty be in the front line? Will it be reinforced through like a more coherent legislative review of what we currently have as instruments? So maybe I can just briefly say that, for instance, for the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, we have spoken to colleagues. Of course, we can't share much at this stage. It's really in the making. But there have been discussions around really making one-stop shops available, and actually, a sort of not just and maybe an obligation. We'll have to see how we're going to phrase this and how it's going to fit in the revisions. That is something that has caught the attention of a lot of my colleagues. We are super interested in energy communities as well as a model to promote to really protect vulnerable consumers. And I think there's a lot of potential with renewable energy communities in particular. I think that's the kind of thing where the energy pool can lose out on, and I think we have a responsibility to make it available to them. And there is also the general kind of discussions around reinforcing technical help and advice, making to refer people to experts and to services that will help them understand their bills and how to reduce energy consumption at home. So all of these things are on the table. For the EPBD, we're exploring obviously how to reinforce the minimum energy performance standards toward like how they can benefit the energy poor, and really just the whole complications around making energy audits and energy performance certificates available for everyone and to really work in their favor, and not to mention the whole financial aspect, so microcredits, subsidized renovation measures, or the use of energy savings for repayment. There are many elements. So I think we have received a lot from the open public consultations, and that is very helpful. And as a last point here, you see the third energy package for gas. So the open public consultation will be available for feedback quite soon, I think. And there has been a lot of talk about how that can also revisit the electricity directive provisions of consumer protection and information. Really about mirroring those provisions that can make sure the energy poor in this through this sector are more protected. And there is also kind of the whole relevance of the district heating and cooling system. So how all these revisions together will make sure that there are no, let's say, loopholes for a lack of protection for these communities. So maybe I can leave it there for now, because the next slide I was going to just kind of give you an overview of the DGNR initiatives, but because Jeppe will be focusing on that, maybe I'll just show you this slide where you see the ones that we deal with. There is also obviously the Clean Energy for Islands platform. We also have the Coal Regions of Transition platform. So all of these are very much interlinked. We are working on making them even more interlinked. And with the Covenant of Mayors, for instance, we really hope to develop the energy poverty pillar strongly with the help of Jeppe Jensen and his team. And so yes, so this will be kind of all from my side for now. And I'm very happy to take on any.
All right, Teresa, perhaps you can just leave your microphone on, because we do have a couple of questions that either I'll pose to you or people from the audience. So if people from who are listening and have questions, this is the right time to plop them into the Hoover platform, and they will get passed on to me. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Teresa, is particularly, you mentioned that this energy poverty has become much more on the political agenda since 2016. During that time, one of the things I'm very aware of is that many, many people have asked the EU to define what is energy poverty, to give a definition of energy poverty. And that's a difficult thing to do, but I think now we're also facing a second difficult question. Is there a way to define what is fair in relation to a fair or a just energy transition? And so one of my questions to you is, has the Commission have you got an answer to that? Or is that something that can be answered, do you think?
So it's thank you, Marilyn. It's a very good question. I see where you come from, but my personal impression is that, I really stand by the idea of giving room for interpretation when it comes to these kind of concepts that really begin being policy concepts. They really start. They really surge. For example, the just transition. Sorry about this. I have noises everywhere. The just transition really is something that has come from the Green Deal, and so as we build on the Green Deal, as we review legislation, as we come up with new initiatives, as has happened to date, that build on this, I think it's the idea of together gradually defining what a just transition is. So I think we have lots of elements that can give us an idea of what it means. So as I said, the fact that the Green Deal is focusing on energy poverty is a clear example. The Renovation Wave has an extremely clear aspect. It really is one of the instruments for a just transition. You have the other initiatives in DGNR. You have, for instance, the system integration strategy, really one of the skeleton strategies to make the EU arrive to carbon neutrality. I think it is evident that we are focusing on protecting, to making this transition about having everyone on board, about addressing really the most vulnerable, to show that we are committed to this fight. And then as a last point, we can't forget that from the very beginning, we also speak of the just transition mechanism, and how we are seeing member states developing their territorial just transition plans. We are seeing how they can complement the recovery facility. So it's extremely important. For example, I can give you an example of how this has transcended also beyond an EU policy idea. When you look at the Spanish recovery plans, they want to present their just transition strategy as the core sort of sources for recovery. That it's open to interpretation, but at the same time we have so many elements that demonstrate what we mean by it that I think it's quite clear.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. And I think what we'll do here is transition over to the next speaker. And one of the things I wanted to bring up at the beginning and forgot to is that I represent the Energy Action Project, and we have been reporting on energy poverty in Europe specifically through our Cold at Home website. And one of the things that has really shocked me is how different energy poverty is from one country to another. And just to quickly give you some examples, we've learned that in Romania, there's 400,000 households that have never been connected to the electricity grid. And to me, that was an absolutely shocking number. In Sweden, one of the things we learned is that houses up in the north, which are actually quite close to the power plants, have a lot of blackouts. And that means everybody there has their own backup systems. They've got diesel generators, and they've got, and families have lost. One of the examples we have is some traditional reindeer herders who lost an entire season's worth of meat because while they were off in the summer with their herds, their power went out and everything that was in the freezer rotted. And then we look at, as you mentioned, Teresa, Spain and Italy and Greece, and there the situation is much more about how do we provide sufficient cooling for people. And so I'm going to transition now to Jeppe Jensen, who has a wide background in sustainable energy systems in very, very different contexts. Some work in developing countries, also specifically on island communities in the EU, and is now working with Climate Action and the Covenant of Mayors to launch the second phase of the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, which is now being called the EU Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. So Jeppe, I want to give the floor over to you and let you talk about what that transition is, and off you go.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Also, thank you, Teresa, for sort of setting the scene. I'll just share my screen here. I hope you can all hear what I say. Obviously, I just got the information that my network is poor. I guess that's a tradition whenever we do these types of virtual gatherings. But very short, I will simply in a very short period of time run you through some of the backgrounds of the very newly established Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, and sort of also a bit an idea of the direction, because this is obviously an invitation to join us on this next step of the journey. So we'll first briefly sort of flip through the mission of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, sort of the very foundation of the next steps, so to speak, and the entry points we have, and what we and you can expect. And then I'll just, as you said, Marilyn, also sort of give just a little bit more of a focus on the Covenant of Mayors, because we are tightly connected in so many ways to the Covenant of Mayors, sort of with a lot of synergetic effects. In very short, you see here that we are, I don't know if we can call ourselves sort of the extended practical hand or extended practical toolbox of Teresa here. And I can see nice spelling mistakes. I apologize, but nevertheless, we are. You'd see that we can that we are here to sort of operationalize a lot of the things that Teresa has been describing before me, as well as support sort of the activities that Teresa and the colleagues are doing. So we will support in sort of the pushing of the enabling environment for, in particular, local actions. So, this is done by sort of basically building capacity by strengthening the network of support for municipalities to take actions, as well as some direct support. I'll talk about more a little later. And all in all, to empower municipalities to take actions simply by providing a context of guidance and experts such as you out there to ensure that the municipalities are in good hands, because to a lot of municipalities this is a fairly new thing to bring to the daily agendas. And I know that because I haven't actually introduced myself properly with Climate Alliance, but we are a city network of more than 1,800 municipalities in sort of all over 27 countries. A little, some also to our eastern neighbors, and we've been working about a bit more than 30 years actually now, focusing primarily on local climate and energy actions. So we kind of have a bit of a finger on the pulse of municipalities. So that's why I feel comfortable when saying so. Basically a little bit about the foundation. Obviously, what Teresa also have been talking about, and what I'm quite sure that most of you has had an active part on previously, is the Energy Poverty Observatory, which I can see here that you can see. Also a good slip of the tongue. It should be the Energy Poverty Observatory and not the Advisory Hub. There's a lot of sort of naming going on here in this transition. But you see that the observatory had sort of a more national-oriented focus, also with their support for the national authorities' new integration of energy poverty into the NECPs. It was slightly more research-oriented. I will explain to you that we are also research-oriented, but perhaps not as much. We're building on the foundation of a lot of interesting mappings that's been going on with the Energy Poverty Observatory, both sort of the state of play with both building of the national indicators, but also see where are we with the national indicators. Also the mapping of expertise and the building of the expert community that's been going on over time. Clearly, also the Covenant of Mayors is also one of our sort of one of the foundations, or sort of a solid pillar of this foundation, simply due to the fact that the Covenant of Mayors have been around for 10 years, focusing very specifically on local climate actions. And I think it was back in 2015, it was the 3 pillars was integrated so that the Covenant of Mayors is focusing on climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and what was sort of initially defined as access to energy, but has sort of in a European context been defined as energy poverty. At the same time, also the past 2-3 years, where the Clean Energy for EU Islands initiative has taken off, there is also clearly a lot of references we can use from there, with the experience of involving all stakeholders on the ground. So that's also something I will touch a little bit more about. The Clean Energy for EU Islands is somehow is presenting a more extended commitment the common denominators is currently, where different stakeholders on the islands are making kind of a musketeer oath to all together go for a full carbonization of their islands. And there's a lot of experience we can make use of here, in particular when it comes to energy poverty in engaging local stakeholders. It could be sort of NGOs, local academia, and knowledge institutes, tenant associations, etc. That can all play a role there. So entry points that we will have, it is, and I might have already mentioned it a lot of time, this is about local actions. We will, at the same time as we will continue to work with to sort of to be the go-to place for the national indicators and the collaboration with Eurostat, we will put a lot of emphasis of rationalizing a lot of the activities and expertise and experience that's been built within the observatory, with a very specific focus on the local authorities as a starting point. Simply because we have a very good experience with that sort of action counts. Actions on the ground leads to good examples. I would not say best examples here, because we can learn from all types of examples, and there's nothing like the power of a good example. Also, when it comes to a good dialogue with decision and policymakers, that at the end of the day will lead to sort of a better enabling environment for even more of these actions. So we have this hopefully we will be able to create this positive feedback loop. And as I said, you can see I've highlighted the municipal level, but we will be focusing also on the national and the regional levels. Therese already mentioned Committee of the Regions, but also in general, the regional level can play a very important role. Often they have also a significant mandate in these processes. With the municipal level, we'll be working on not only sort of on the capacity building of the support to the municipalities, but also sort of describing how municipalities can become sort of a facilitator or coordinator of the energy poverty efforts, referring back to what I talked about before with sort of inclusion of many more stakeholders, such as sort of the local NGOs, academia, etc., energy agencies, citizens' initiative, the cooperatives was mentioned recently, simply because we have very good experience with anchoring these efforts, so that whenever we, for instance, from the advisory hub have been collaborating with the municipality, it's always nice when you have a good context and a good group of organizations that will be there to let's say keep the fire burning, when we from the advisory hub hopefully has created the spark. Sort of more practical, what you can expect to see from us in the future, and this is not sort of the full list here, but we will provide from our side sort of to local authorities, to the local level, direct support via a series of calls, where we will provide support both from centrally, from the advisory hub with the partners you've seen I'm sure that you'll recognize the series of the icons that was on the first slides, as some of the, let's say, very solid players in the field. At the same time as we will have sort of more bilateral support, where we will develop action plans on specific energy poverty activities, we hope to have kind of a seamless sort of transition onto an open to all support, which is obviously sort of the publications, as well as a very, very very large focus on online training with different curriculums in sort of a different depth and different length of these trainings. So if you have 5 minutes and you need to sort of learn something, there is a possibility. If you have, let's say, if you have, say, let's say, a week of holiday, we can also entertain you for a full week with some in-depth training. At the same time, knock on wood, we'll soon start with physical workshops as well as conferences, and then of course we have sort of our help desk where you can all where you can pose any questions that you may not be able to find on our on the website that is also in the making. I hope this has spurred a lot of questions, perhaps not right here on the spot, but if there are any further questions to what I've said here, then you are most welcome to contact to our help desk. Just to sort of just wanted to highlight the Covenant of Mayors, because the contract, the new Energy Poverty Advisory Hub has specifically actually been developed to provide direct support to the covenanters, to what we call the covenant community, which involves currently more than 10,000 local authorities. And mind that these are not just these local authorities have actually made a political decision to sign up for the Covenant of Mayors. That means that they have made a political decision, and in particular those with the latest that have signed the latest commitment of 2030 have actually made a political commitment to take action on energy poverty. So that we have a very large community of municipalities that have said politically we are ready to go, and obviously that requires a good sort of guiding framework for them. And they are the Covenant of Mayors as the community as sort of building up bottom up also on in regard to their methodologies. They will in the coming year now sort of establish and consolidate the framework for monitoring and implementing energy poverty actions. And that's where let's say where sort of our very strict focus on energy poverty in the advisory hub comes in as sort of the inputs to consolidate this, and as well as to later on be there to support the municipalities that will then take upon the planning. I think that's about it, and as you can see, the graphical identity, the graphic identity is also a lot of information in the making. I can also see these slides are in the making. So we look forward to sort of bring you all on board and strengthen the community around and sort of the expert community, so that municipalities and their stakeholders feel comfortable in either sort of continuing the journey or starting it.
Great, thanks you, Jeppe, and I'm really grateful that you covered both the foundational work that has gone into the advisory hub and what its objectives will be. And it's great to see that there's so many practical objectives to it at the local level. And this is a really good transition. And just to remind people, we'll go through the other two presentations and then have a joint Q&A at the end of the session. So I'm now going to introduce Cesare Vichy, who is representing two entities today, the European Consumer Organization, which has the acronym BEUC, so you may know it as that, but also a Horizon 2020 program that is STEP, Solutions to Tackle Energy Poverty. And as in those two roles, Cesare very much reflects the people that both the EU policy and the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub are looking to assist. So I think, Cesare, one of the things that I hope you're going to cover for us is how do we go from these high-level activities to work for these people to how do we work with these people? And I'm going to give you the floor, Cesare.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. And I'm very eager to delve into it, hearing also Marilyn and Jeppe talking about how all these political good decisions brought us to this point. So as Marilyn said, I'm Cesare, I work for STEP, which is a Horizon 2020 project for providing solutions to tackle energy poverty. And if I can have the next slide, please. Then I'll show you, this is where our stars are. This is the 9 countries that we work with, the countries that we've identified with the highest degree of energy poverty at the moment, but also countries where we have very active consumer organizations. So we're already in contact with consumers, but some of them need advice on energy poverty and how to mitigate this. And the aim of the project is providing this advice, but also some low-cost measures that they can implement that would bring, on top of this, some behavior change. We started in June 2019, full of enthusiasm, creating the entire network of mitigating this. And then at the beginning of last year, when we were eager to launch, of course, we had the same surprise as everyone. So we gathered our forces and we extended the 6 more months. And we've adapted all our methodology to fighting energy poverty under COVID, which also brought some even more consumers in such a vulnerable situation. So I guess we're the right project at the right moment. If I could have the next slide, please. Before we started, we also, the same as the Commission, the same as the Observatory, tried to understand what was happening in the countries we were working with. And we've created some reports of how energy poverty is perceived in these countries, both from the consumer organizations we work with, from the authorities, from the regulators, and also from the frontline organizations. These are the organizations that were teaming up in the countries in order to implement the project. And they're organizations that differ very much in nature, but they're directly in contact with the most energy poor. So if for the ones in the audience, if you're interested to see more on the reports we've done, we've surveyed more than 150 organizations of volunteers, of municipalities, regulators that are directly involved into this, and also identified some support schemes that we can recommend to consumers, because when they come to advice for our centers and organizations, we can also directly tell them, okay, there's this financing possibility, and this is the red wire that we can help you eliminate. So there's a summary available, and also some available best practices, which are across nations, which we are working on. And of course, ourselves, we've also identified some best practices fighting COVID. But to tell you more about how the 3 main pillars of our project, if I could have the next slide. Our pillars are training, advice, and advocacy. We are training the staff in our organizations. We are training the frontline workers we are working with, and then together we are providing advice. Of course, in current situations, face-to-face training was not available unless respecting all the sanitary procedures in the countries where this was possible. So we also went for a 2-step approach of online training, because we've also developed some online training modules, which initially these were aimed only for frontline workers and our advisors, but now we've also adapted them to consumers and making them more hands-on to their daily lives. But because we don't want to leave things as they are, just in training and advice, we want to take things one step further and also influence the policies in the countries we work with. So for this, we've developed a 13 steps recommendation policies, which provide an area of objectives where directly our partners have already worked with it. And I can tell you already some success stories of STEP being mentioned, for example, as a solution tackle energy poverty in the NECP in Lithuania, of STEP being picked up as a modality to work with energy poor by the regulators and national authorities in Slovakia, of Portugal taking the recommendations, and here I bring praise to DECO, translating them in Portuguese, and also advocating with these during COVID to stop disconnections and help consumers pay their bills in installments. So all this document is a living one supporting consumers in this period. And we'll also soon develop a second policy recommendations that reflects even better the current situation. If I could have the next slide to show that what has happened in this new brave COVID world. Besides adapting to online training, we've also picked up the phone. If consumers could have before went to an office, now they could use WhatsApp or the phone to directly reach for advice. Some consumers also received printed press because there are consumers that cannot reach internet so easily to find the number they require. So for example, in Cyprus or in Slovakia, our partners send them materials where they would have the contact address of STEP, and then they could follow up. To reach the youngest energy poor, we've developed very catchy YouTube videos, and here with the help of Enact, thank you very much for the support into that. And I've definitely learned a lot of things of draft proofing. And for the ones you know, even draft proofing your keep hole can bring incredible savings for your comfort and for your wallet. And we've reached to our challenge, the biggest challenge in COVID world, that energy poor can at the end be digitally poor. And how do you reach someone that can barely heat their homes that doesn't have internet? So this is we're rediscovering things that we need to work with, and this is we're also putting this as our key challenge now. We've also integrated with STEP the most vulnerable in minorities. For example, in Slovakia, they've even used their printed materials, they even translated them in Braille, because maybe there's a minority that maybe a most vulnerable minority that we don't think of, but maybe people that don't see, they also need comfort in their homes. In Slovakia, they've also reached out to the Roma community. And here we found out that you cannot send one of our advisors. We also need to provide training to advisors that are part of the Roma community themselves. So we're also looking forward to see how this part of the project is developing. What we find also interesting, for example, if you go into the more Nordic countries we work with, Latvia and Lithuania, where the buildings are very much former Eastern Communist style, there we saw that the most reliable advisor maybe is not our advisor, but is the manager of the building, the one where you pay your bills every day. And then we train that person. So we see in this entire network of how to reach people is finding the right people that the vulnerable consumers believe in. So for every country, we've seen this and tried to reach out. Another success story, for example, old people in Poland, they watch TV and they like to see their series. So FPRN Polish partner was thinking of creating a TV university where the oldest people would be directly next to their favorite TV show, they would have some energy efficiency guidance, and then we could reach them out with our phone number and continue our research in STEP. So yeah, for every country indeed has its own way of reaching out, and I'm definitely very much enriched myself when hearing this from the partners we're working on. And then we also in STEP, we have a research agency, which I very much salute Age Research, who's doing the entire mapping and understanding of the savings we are creating with energy poor. And at the end of the day, they realize that actually we might have more consumption in COVID world when more people stay at home, either work from home or they've been furloughed or layout, and not only staying more at home, but also consuming more. So they had the great task of introducing into the questionnaires we have in STEP to analyze our energy savings, these new COVID realities, to be able to analyze what are actually the savings, but in a translated COVID world where the behaviors have changed. If I could have the next slide, please. Getting back to our 13th policy recommendation, here is my dream and STEP's dream, is to create a network and these networks to communicate among themselves. For STEP, we manage this through our partners who are creating networks in their own countries. So if you want to reach out for any of the countries in STEP, please do. But also, if you're creating networks in your own countries and you want to reach out to our module, I will leave my contact details at the end. So having energy efficiency as a priority, thinking of the most vulnerable groups, and creating a network of trusted advisors. We've started from consumer organizations, and working with frontline workers, but this can go so much more in depth to understanding how we can pick everyone and help them manage their house and pay less. And in current times, this can be more people than we've ever imagined. So if I go for next slide. For things to look forward, please visit our website, stepenergy.eu. We have a new set of policy recommendations coming up because we want to follow the times. So we saw that what we've made as recommendations were before the Renovation Wave, they were before the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive, and before the European Green Deal. So the new set will focus more on what financing is available for consumers in difficulty regarding their energy bills, regarding their houses, and to team up a bit with Jeppe, how municipalities can be there for consumers. So we're also tackling a point. So Jeppe, I open the floor for communication further because I liked what you were mentioning. So I guess it's a team effort, and I salute the conference for thinking that decarbonization is not just a nice concept that is at EU level and only certain people can apply it, but since it will reach all consumers, we must make sure that we're all in this together to make it happen. I thank you all for the attention, and I remain at your disposal.
Great, that was super interesting, Cesare. And I'm going to have one of my colleagues from Enact put a link into the Whova platform to show you one of the videos that we've done. And I'm excited to let you know that, so we initially did the videos in English. They're now being translated into 4 languages. So Portuguese, Bulgarian, Czech, maybe that's just 3. But one of the things that's really important to let everybody that's on this call know is if you want to use those videos, including rebranding them and translating them, this is what STEP is all about, is how do we create resources and then get them used as widely as possible. So that the videos exist, the filming's been done. It's really very simple and inexpensive to modify them and adapt them for different audiences. So as I said, one of my colleagues will put a link in, and if you're interested, then you can contact us later. Cesare, it was a great presentation. And now we're going to move over to Martha Myers, who is coordinator of the Right to Energy Coalition, which now we're kind of going back from, we did EU policy and EU practical action on the technical side. Then we looked at how do we work with consumers. And now, Martha, we're going to go back to you and say, well, how does the coalition work on behalf of citizens and the right to energy going back into the policy framework? So off you go, Martha.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. And thank you so much, Jeppe and Cesare and Teresa, who are fantastic allies in this in this discussion, and also to FPRN and Engage, who have put this amazing conference together. So I trust with this audience, we don't need to discuss the urgency of addressing energy poverty. It has never been more urgent than right now. So I will go straight into today how our work, particularly with the Right to Energy Coalition, works to tackle energy poverty across the EU and also at national and local level, and the importance of civil society actors in this. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So with the Right to Energy Coalition, we're in quite a unique position because we are an EU Brussels-based coalition who bring together a diverse range of stakeholders to work and tackle energy poverty at EU, national and local level. What's exciting is we bring together trade unions, so we have coalition partners EPSU, the Public Service Union, ETUC, the Trade Union Confederation, anti-poverty organisations such as APAN, the European Anti-Poverty Network, and FIENSA, the Homeless Association, environmental NGOs such as Friends of the Earth Europe, who coordinates the coalition, and Greenpeace, and health organisations such as HEAL, social justice groups from across Europe who are working on energy poverty and energy justice on the ground in the communities, such as Fuel Poverty Action, who I'm sure is well known to many of you in FPRN in the UK, and also Alianza contra la Pobreza Energética, who work in Catalonia and across Spain, as well as partners across Eastern Europe, who I'll talk about a bit later. We have energy cooperatives such as Energy Cities and ResCop, and social housing providers such as Housing Europe. So here we have a really diverse range of expertise where people can share information, skills, and also concerns regarding energy policy or social policy to make sure that we have the most resilient social and environmental policy recommendations to ensure a just energy transition. And our clear message that unites all of us in the coalition is that access to clean, affordable energy is a human right. This is why we're called the Right to Energy Movement. And we are kind of inspired by the Right to Water movement, which many of you might remember, and it has been very active since 2015. Next slide, please, Danielle. Fantastic. So just moving on to the importance of including civil society actors. So Cesare mentioned around consumer organisations and also reaching out to the energy poor, which is fantastic work through STEP. And when I mention civil society actors, I do mean the third sector, such as NGOs, but I also mean grassroots groups, community groups, and social organisations. And one of the key reasons for bringing in these groups is to raise political awareness and to really galvanise a movement to address energy poverty on the ground. This also means that we're able to make energy policy, which can often be quite a kind of bureaucratic process, make it more accessible to movements and to those who are directly affected. And we aim to listen directly to energy poor citizens. So we do this through our work with our EU national and local partners. We now have 26 coalition members, about half of which are based in Brussels, working on EU legislation, and half of which are based in national or local level action. So we have partners, Res Foundation based in Serbia, Habitat for Bulgaria, who work in Bulgaria, and as well as Italy, Spain, UK, France, Belgium, and Lithuania. So we have quite a good breadth of coalition partners who are directly working with energy poor citizens, galvanizing movements in their country, and we're able to really listen to the demands of those on the ground. Finally, I'd just like to state that often energy poverty is talked about in quite technocratic terms, which is completely, needed sometimes around energy policy, making sure that we're getting the number crunching. However, I do want to reiterate that energy poverty is a political issue that requires a political response. It is often felt by those living in energy precarity as a personal struggle or an invisible burden that is, their particular issue. However, at our coalition, we really aim to show that energy poverty is a structural inequality and is, as Teresa mentioned, linked to inefficient housing, neoliberal energy markets, and also wider poverty indicators. And finally, I'd just like to share that, particularly for us at Friends of the Earth Europe and across the Right to Energy Coalition, we see energy poverty as a matter of climate justice. This is because, as we know, most energy poor citizens are marginalized groups, so women-led households or people of color or the elderly. And we really tried to, in the coalition, bring in the aspects of gender justice, racial justice, and class justice, to bring in organisations and ideas that maybe wouldn't otherwise be engaged with energy policy. Next slide, please. So how do we make this happen? We have taken 3 kind of key reasons for energy poverty: inefficient housing, neoliberal energy markets, and wider poverty indicators, to create 3 very clear demands for our coalition. So the first one is for the renovations for the energy poor. I'll go into a little bit more detail about those in a second. The ban on disconnections, which many of you will know has been a really ripe discussion, particularly during COVID-19 across Europe. And I know that in Gaza we're doing amazing mapping of the COVID-19 measures across Europe. And with this particular demand, we also ask for a minimum amount of energy for all. A band of free energy, which isn't means tested, which is something which Fuel Poverty Action, our coalition members, are particularly pioneering. And the third one is energy democracy. So here, relating back to energy communities and the role of energy cooperatives or community renewables in engaging and empowering citizens to own their energy more effectively. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to go into our theory of change. First of all, it's quite broad. We have a lot of different angles of change in our coalition. First of all, we do advocacy and policy recommendations at EU national and local level. So we've been working directly with DG ENA on the Renovation Wave, before the Renovation Wave, and also now with the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Buildings Directive, and making sure that the energy poor are prioritised in that journey. And we're able to share our expertise with the Commission and our recommendations from what we've heard from our local and national partners and what they need to make sure that the Renovation Wave is a success. We also do national and local advocacy. So we've been assessing the NECPs and the long-term renovation strategies across Europe, both with our partners, so with my colleagues in Friends of the Earth groups across Europe, and also within the coalition, and making sure that we're encouraging governments to take sufficient and ambitious action. And finally, we are taking local grassroots action across Europe. So 2 weeks ago was Energy Poverty Week, which is slowly being relaunched at EU level. And to mark that, our Spanish coalition partners did a week of direct action in Spain, calling for a ban on disconnections across Spain, which was really effective. And they've had great conversations with decision makers since then. As well as that, we really believe in movement building. Although energy poverty can be discussed with experts, it's also very clear that we need to really build grassroots and community level action. And you might have seen that at our Right to Energy Forum, where we brought together campaigners, grassroots activists, and national and international decision makers, and there was over 1,000 attendees at that event in December. And we also provide briefings and reports, and narrative building is a really clear one for us, working on energy justice. I'll move on just so that we have time for questions afterwards. So finally, I'd just like to reiterate here, after Teresa and Jepe's point, that there is a fantastic year ahead of us for action to tackle energy poverty. And 2020 was the year where we really saw the narrative clarified by the European Commission with the guidelines and the Renovation Wave. And 2021 is where we turn this narrative into action. 2 particular ones we're focusing on this year is with renovations for the energy poor. And this is particularly within the Energy Efficiency Directive and Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, as Teresa mentioned. And here we have particular policy recommendations on minimum energy performance standards with social guidelines, financing options, and how to prioritise the energy poor effectively. We've also just started our position on decarbonisation of heating and cooling and how the energy poor cannot be left behind in this discussion and locked in further into gas. And finally, our work on ban on disconnections. We've just published a briefing on the ban on disconnections in the time of COVID-19. And we'll be working on this more in the adaptation strategies and the European Pillar of Social Rights. There's also room for discussions on this at EU level with the ETS and the extension of buildings, which could have really dire consequences for energy prices and spikes. And we will be also discussing the Renewable Energy Directive, as well as other roundtables on specifically low-income tenants, social housing, and rural homeowners in the CEE region. And next slide, please. So I'll leave it there for now. Feel free to email me. My email is at the bottom of here. And also you can follow us on Twitter. And the Right to Energy has a resources section, which has all of our briefings and reports from coalition members, as well as our allies and partners. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Martha. So I'm excited to tell you that we do have a number of really interesting questions coming forward. So I'm going to invite each of the panelists to turn their cameras back on and be present and ready to answer questions. And the first question comes from Silvio, who is a product designer in doing his PhD in relation to solutions to alleviate energy poverty. And his question is, what can we do to help people have an impact in the shortest time possible? And I'm going to, I think, give this over to Cesare and also to Jeppe, because you're both working at that practical level. But I also want to just take a moment before I hand it over to talk about something that we haven't seen very much of yet in this conference, is the social innovation movement to tackle energy poverty. And one of the most exciting examples I know of is the Papillon project in Belgium, which is working with Bosch, who makes super high efficiency appliances that are typically too expensive for people who are low income and living in rental communities to own. But what Papillon has done is create a rental system. And so immediately these people get, for €9 a month, they get to rent a whole suite of energy efficient appliances. And that doesn't only mean that their energy bill goes down. For some of them, it means they don't have to go to the laundromat anymore. And so there's a time element that comes into that as well. And again, one of my colleagues is going to put a link into the Hoover platform on some of the reporting we've done about various social innovation projects to tackle energy poverty. And I also want to mention that this has been a strong focus of the Schneider Electric Foundation, and I know that they're going to keep working on this. So Cesare and Jeppe, we're 10 minutes left and we've got about 5 questions. So I'm going to give you 1 minute each to say, what can we do quickly to have a high impact?
I'll be quick. On my side, besides the advice is okay if someone tells, yeah, you should turn off your lights. But if you don't have LED lighting, turning off your lights will not probably bring you much. So on our side, we're also providing, like, for some of the consumers, we're seeing one efficient measure, either a dropped taping proof, dropped taping side, or a thermostat, or a light bulb, like providing and showing them, okay, this is exactly the thing that you should be using to bring change at this right moment.
Jeppe?
I think from my side, if only there was sort of an off button we haven't found somewhere to do that would trigger everything here. But I think the important thing is that we put this on the agenda at local level, because the municipalities are basically the implementers here, and build the capacity within the municipalities to also ensure that everybody is around, and enable them to also build sort of local indicators that can be contextual, in order to say, like, we have a local baseline that circulates around the specific conditions of our municipality, and that will initially also show that that can sort of trigger I mean, we need to be able to draw a finishing line in order to run towards it, basically. I think these can basically sort of in very short, I think we're still at a stage where sort of these definitions are quite important, and bringing them to the local agenda.
Great. Okay, William Baker asks, quite a few people mentioned renewables during this session and the importance of community energy, but I think it's also important to recognize that every unit of energy that we don't use collectively is the most valuable. So we haven't, we've talked about energy efficiency and we've talked about renewables. And William's question is really looking at how do we do those things in the right order? How do we make sure that buildings are efficient first before putting renewables on them? Is there, does anybody want to weigh in on that? How do we make sure that buildings are not over-consuming before we change their energy systems?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a brief answer. So yeah, basically, particularly with my work with Friends of the Earth Europe, we really call for renovations and renewables for the energy poor now, because this is obviously about energy democracy as well as cutting carbon emissions and reducing energy poverty. It is really a win-win-win. And as we're seeing, the energy efficiency and renovation wave is the flagship of the EU Green Deal at the moment, and its key line is that it leaves no one behind. This is a great opportunity for there to be much more synergies between the Buildings Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Renewable Energy Directive, and this is something that we're really working on to make sure that these synergies are really clear, because if we're going to be doing huge renovation efforts, we should also be incorporating renewables into that process. There's no reason for this to be, these contracts could be done at the same time, and also be much more comprehensive, rather than us trying to tackle energy efficiency and then later on be putting on renewables. So for us, it's about, first of all, getting these very clear at EU level, and then making these clearer at national and local level.
Great. All right. I'm going to go on to the next question. So hopefully nobody else had anything they wanted to add that, but good answer, Martha. Thank you. So this question is really geared towards Teresa. The EU has now done a good job of saying what is energy poverty, how are we measuring it, how are we going to get member states to take action on it and measure the fact that they're taking action. The question is there any initiative at this point to measure, to benchmark what the EU is doing against other continents or other groups of countries?
Thank you, Marilyn. As you see, I've had to change my video connection because it was really failing before. So that's a very good point. And as you probably know, the Covenant of Mayors, we of course have the EU Covenant of Mayors, but then there is the Global Covenant of Mayors. Jeppe, I'm sure it can maybe fill in anything that I don't know so much about on this. But they, for example, are doing they're increasingly trying to map regional, and when we talk about regional, it's really about continental differences. They want to see what indicators are being used to track it, to monitor energy poverty, to measure the impact of specific measures, and in that respect, they have reached out to the Commission, but it's really just on a kind of best practice sharing basis. They're aware of the Commission's work around the recommendation and of course the broader framework, policy frameworks. So there is that, and then, for instance, as I mentioned in my presentation, there is also the Committee of the Regions, or like as an example of an actor that can help us communicate these to the world, let's say to other regions. The Committee of the Regions could also work in that. In informing others out there about the EU's
focus on energy poverty.
Great, thanks, Teresa. So we're down to our last 4 minutes, and I'm going to let you know a question that was asked by a couple of different people, and then plug another session that I'm hosting on Thursday. So the question really is a bit twofold. Has anybody really clearly defined what a just transition is? And in relation to that, how do we reach the most vulnerable and the hard to reach households in order to deliver that just transition? Given the time that we have left, which is about 3 minutes, I'm going to invite people to join us on Thursday at 1:15 UK time, where we've got a session that's called Making Decarbonization Fair, Perspectives from Both Ends of the Spectrum. And during that session, we're going to have Lawrence Jones, who's the VP International for the Edison Electric Institute, which is the trade association for all the utility companies in the US and increasingly more globally. So he's going to talk about how do you make a just transition at the utility scale level. And also Harish Hande from Selco Foundation India. And Harish has been active for about 25 years in India, taking off-grid electrification into very remote, very poor communities. So he's going to talk about community energy, how do you make that fair and just, and how do you, and one of the questions I've posed to them is, where do you two cross over in the whole just transition, making decarbonization fair? We have 2 minutes. If anybody that's on the panel wants to make a quick response to that, what is the just transition, or how do we reach the most vulnerable households? Take the floor, please.
I'll answer one of the questions very quickly because I think Cesare can offer more. But I'd like to say that the work that Jeppe and Teresa and Cesare has shared about how we really need to be engaging with the Covenant of the Mayors and the Committee of Regions is such a fantastic example of actually we need to get the action into the municipalities. However, on a kind of more meta level, I think that a just transition is often seen as cutting carbon emissions so that those on the front lines of climate change aren't most affected. However, I would argue that it's not just about cutting carbon emissions, but it's about how we do that. What social impact is being made and making sure that we're making it just and that the most marginalized in society are prioritized in the energy transition and not left behind. And the second one is what methods we do to do this. So who are we hearing? Whose voices are we amplifying? What demands are we listening to? And what communities are we involving in these discussions? So for me, a real just energy transition is about not just cutting carbon emissions, but is about mitigating the social impact, prioritizing the most marginalized, and also making sure that those who are most affected are prioritized and involved in the discussions and methods of the decision making itself.
And I'll add on the point mentioned by Martha that if we're switching technologies to make sure we're going to a more carbon neutral world, we have to make sure the solutions we're choosing, they are the right ones, because the most vulnerable, they cannot afford to second guess or choose some technology now that will become in 5 years obsolete. There's no time for second guessing. And also what they choose as methods must be the best one and the most affordable ones. And I think this is a bet that must be a winning one from the start. And that's exactly what we're working with consumer organizations, first to advise them, but also to make sure that whatever is happening will bring the best impact.
Great. All right. Our time has come to an end. So thank you to all of our panelists and to the 70 participants that we had over the time. The panelists can go into Whova and write answers to questions that may still be there. So if you want to answer a question in more detail, feel free to do that on the Whova platform. And we'll be looking forward to seeing many of you back for subsequent panels today.
Many thanks. It's been a great session.
Great. It's going to.